Welcome back to WalkWood Furniture. Today I'm sharing the process behind a piece called the WalkWood Cabinet. This is not a piece for sale. It's a permanent statement piece created to live inside my workshop and support the work that happens here every day. I'm going to walk you through decisions behind the process, from preparation to final documentation. Not to rush through steps, but to explain how intention and restraint shapes the outcome. If this helps you slow down and be more intentional in your own work, then it's doing exactly what it's meant to do. I always begin by removing the hardware. This step isn't about getting the piece out of the way. It's about assessment. Removing hardware allows me to see stress points, previous repairs, seams, and areas that may need attention later in the process. This is where I start listening to the piece instead of imposing decisions too early. Before any finished work begins, I slow the piece down. Cleaning isn't just about removing dirt. It's about resetting the surface so every decision that follows has integrity. For the WalkWood cabinet, I use scrub cutter because it cleans thoroughly without leaving residue behind. When a surface is truly clean, it tells you what it needs next. You can see areas of wear more clearly. You can feel inconsistencies. I don't rush past this step because longevity depends on what happens before the first coat ever goes on. Once the surface was clean, I address small structural and surface fixes. Everything doesn't have to be perfect, but it does need to be stable. Stability is what allows a finish to last, especially in a working environment like a workshop. Sanding is where I slow the piece down again. This step isn't about removing everything. It's about refining what's already there. I'm not trying to reshape the piece. I'm simply smoothing transitions, softening inconsistencies, and preparing the surface to receive finish evenly. I let the surface guide how much sanding is needed. Too much pressure or over sanding can erase character. This is a light, controlled step, just enough to support clarity and longevity in the finish. I didn't prime this piece entirely, and that was intentional. I spot primed only where the surface asked for it, corners, edges, and areas showing wear and inconsistencies. Primer is not a blanket step for me, it's a corrective one. Overpriming can flatten details and introduce buildup that doesn't serve the piece. Responding to the surface instead of automatically covering it preserves character and clarity. When painting the WalkWood cabinet, my focus wasn't coverage, it was control. I watch how the paint lays, how it absorbs light, and how the surface responds. One of the most important skills in finishing is knowing when to stop. Going back too soon can change how a paint cures and how it reads once it dries. Restraint here protects the clarity of the finish. There's one step you won't see on camera, but it's important to name. I added a subtle black glaze selectively on 2 outer arches, not the center, and lightly in the drawer corners. This wasn't about adding drama, it was about depth. The goal was to soften the metallic rub and buff wax and allow the finish to read more grounded and dimensional. I'm comfortable naming steps that aren't filmed because the integrity of the process matters more than the completeness of the finish. The glass remained in place throughout this process. I masked it early, so once the finished work was complete, all that was needed was careful cleaning. Sometimes the most respectful approach is not disturbing what doesn't need to be removed. Once the paint has settled, I seal the piece using Poly Ultra, applying 2 control coats. Sealing for me is stewardship. Even when the surface feels dry, it's still curing. Respecting the time protects the work long term. The WalkWood Cabinet lives inside a working workshop, so durability matters, but never at the expense of clarity. Conditioning the drawers is one of those steps that often gets overlooked, but it matters. This is about restoring balance to the wood, not changing it. I condition the drawers to nurture the surface, reduce dryness, and help the wood move and age more gracefully over time. It also improves how the drawer feels in use. Smooth movement, quiet contrast, no resistance. This step isn't about visibility. It's about longevity and the experience of the piece long after the finished work is complete. I choose to keep the original hardware that came with this piece. Original hardware carries the history and intention of the design. Replacing it isn't always an upgrade. By cleaning and reusing what was already here, the piece stays grounded in its original character while still feeling refreshed. This choice supports continuity. The hardware looks like it belongs because it does. Preserving what is well made is part of honoring the craftsmanship of the piece. I did reinstall the backboard. Structural elements matter, not just for stability, but how a piece holds itself over time. I didn't stage the WalkWood cabinet in its traditional sense. What you're seeing is the finished piece as it exists, grounded, placed, and ready to support the work of the WalkWood cabinet. Sometimes documentation is enough. Letting the work stand on its own is part of the process. The WalkWood cabinet was created to live here, to support finishes, decisions, and the work that happens every day. The process you've seen isn't about speed or spectacle. It's about respect for material, for craft, for longevity. If this helped you slow down and be more intentional, then it served its purpose. Thank you for spending time here.